Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Hi everyone, welcome to another recap and review and comparison for Outlander Season 7, Episode 12, Carnal Knowledge. All right, are you guys ready? Are you ready for this? Oh my gosh, I am vibrating with excitement. When I finished this the first time around, I was just feeling it. I was feeling it. I love this so much. I was so excited for this content, you guys. I can't even tell you. Well, I did. I told you last week. Between last week and this week is some of my favorite lines ever written by Diana Gabaldon, and the show just gave them all to me. Okay, like I literally have a page here of just every single scene that is direct from the book. Okay, this is fantastic. Besides just having some of the best acting I've seen, the nuance as well as like bold moments, the way they're able to act with the silence and like their emotions are all there. Like it was so good. It was so good. Okay, so we're not going to waste any time. What I'll always say is I break this kind of into three main parts. If this is randomly the first one that you're finding of mine, I go over a recap, literally kind of going scene by scene, saying how I liked it, everything. Then I do a comparison between the book and the show. Then I kind of talk about, like within that comparison is both like what's exactly the same, the order maybe they moved it around, and then also like what was left out. We'll talk about what was left out. And then I will give the show a grade from 1 to 10 of how accurate that it was, because I am a book focused person. That's what these reviews are based on, is how well it sticks to the original content. But I mean, I do talk about my like enjoyment level as well. Like I can think that like there are some episodes of the show that I just absolutely love, but they weren't really book accurate at all. But lately that hasn't been the case. The show has just been hitting all the home runs. Like it's been amazing. So we won't waste any time. I am on a bit of a time crunch today, so I can't talk too long, not because I can talk for ages, but I have to be done with this. I only have like 35 minutes to film, so we gotta go. So we start off right with the cold open, right where we ended it, okay? And it starts with the scene with Jamie and John, and they are headed out of town. Now they need to get out of Philadelphia without Jamie getting arrested, but it's also in the middle of an evacuation because Clinton, I tried to write down the people's names, Clinton is evacuating and it's going to be taken over by, the rebels are going to be taking it over. So there's like a change in power happening, and that's an awkward thing because we have like, John, who isn't currently active, or from what he knows, he isn't currently active, but his, person that he just married is a rebel, and now his dearest friend is back from the dead, and he is a rebel general. Like things are all about to culminate for us here. So they're making their way out of town, and John is kind of like, anyway, so he gives him his coat. Jamie, he's like, why did you come back in this way? Why'd you sneak in? Why are they after you? And he's like, well, my papers were in order, but they wanted to search me before I came in. And John's like, well, what? And he's like, well, I had some things that I'd rather they not find, which we'll get to in a moment. And then Jamie's like, if we get caught, tell them that I forced you to be here. And John is like, okay. So then we get outside of town, and they really kind of get like in on it, and John is just like, I thought you were dead, like why did you come in? And he's like, because of Claire. And John's like, because of Claire? And he's like, I heard that Europa, whatever it was called, the Europa, whatever, that it had sunk, and I knew she knew what ship I was on. I knew that she would think I was dead. So he, that's why he risked coming there as soon as he did, instead of just like waiting. He's like, I couldn't bear her to continue to think I was dead, because, well, let's be real. We know what that was like for her. Okay. We saw it viscerally happen, that she was on the brink of suicide multiple times, which of course we'll come back around to that as well. And then we have the fantastic line, which is right from it. I've had carnal knowledge of your wife. And Jamie going, oh, why? Like, Why would you do that? And, you know, they do this really quick back and forth. I'm not going to repeat line for line because we're going to talk about those when we get to the book accuracy of it, because this is a scene. But they go back and forth about it, and it gets to the point of he's like, well, why? You know, basically, like, I know you're not into women. Like, was she so drunk that she didn't care about that, or blah, blah, blah? And he was like, we were hurting. And he's like, okay, why? And he's like, we were both fucking you. And then Jamie punches him, because that's bringing up a lot of feelings. And that goes into the intro, which was great. Okay. Like, it was great. I loved it. So well done. The face acting, the just gut-wrenching stuff of like, Jamie, you've just come blowing into town and you have no idea about the destruction that was happening between us, which again, not his fault. He didn't know this was going to happen, but it's like, this is what you do to people, like, without even meaning to, you know? So then we get back from the intro and we are at William and Claire, and they're like, Claire is like smiling at like that Jamie's alive and like, this is great. But William has just had his world rocked. Okay. And this episode, you know, we see a bit of that spiraling for him. And I know, well, actually I don't know, because I try not to look at anyone else's opinions until I filmed this. I know that honestly, it's like with any of the kids in this series, people get really harsh with them, but William is like, he's been lied to, and there's so many different levels of it, and so many people have lied to him. And so right away we get into a pretty intense conversation. Claire's the only one left there to ask questions to. And so he asked one of my favorite lines. So he's like, I don't know what to call you. And she's like, well, I guess I'm your stepmother in either scenario, which again, I said before, I love that. And he asked, like, do you know who my mother was? And we get into this discussion, and she's like, yes, I did know. And he's like, was she raped? And he's like, no. And he's like, are you sure he's telling you the truth? And she's like, yes. And we're all like, he would never do that. And so then he's like, well, I've always heard that she was reckless. And Claire, she's being very gentle with this in her way of, she's like, well, I wouldn't judge her too harshly. And he's like, no, she was reckless because she was either forced or she cheated on my real father. You know, like, he's not knowing the nuance of what was going on yet. Someday he will. And realize that, I mean, it was rape for someone, and it wasn't really Geneva who it was. But power dynamic rape is very difficult to discuss, especially in the 1770s with a young man. They don't quite get that. But we'll touch on that, actually, because he doesn't fully get this, but it can happen. It can happen. And he freaks out. He gets very angry. He breaks a lot of things. Smash, smash, smash. We know who that reminds us of, that temper that we've seen. And then he punches a mirror when he looks at himself. And that cuts us back to the other punch that we just saw, which, again, great directing, great camera cut right there. Like, that was brilliant. And so he punched him. He's rolling down the hill. And he's like, I can't remember what Jamie says. And he's like, I'm not sorry, just kill me. And Jamie is beating the heck out of him. He really breaks his orbital bone, which we'll get into, which, I mean, leads to our sexy eye patch later on. I'm very excited about the sexy eye patch, I won't lie. And remember, too, Jamie had put his coat on John. John had also just received a letter from Colonel Graves at the end of the last episode, right? He was about to read it to Claire when Jamie came in. So he hasn't read that. It's in his pocket, okay? And they're punching each other. And then this asshat named Jethro and company show up, which is part of the rebels. And he asks, who are you? And Jamie says, I am Colonel Fraser of Morgan's Riflemen, blah, blah, blah. And this, you know, we're having a discussion, blah, blah, blah. And one of the men recognizes John as a soldier. And John is like, I'm Lord John Grey. I'm no longer a soldier. I resigned my commission. And the dude's like, I saw him in his suit. Well, there's a reason why in the intro, if you watch it, they remind us that John had wore his uniform because he was trying to protect, I just forgot her name, but trying to protect the house. That's why he was wearing the uniform to keep people from causing problems for Henry and Grace, was protecting him and everything. But that man recognized him and has seen him and is like, and he's a spy. He's not wearing his uniform. So this all just spirals out of control, okay? John and Jamie were trying to have this, well, I mean, John was getting the shit kicked out of him because he isn't going to fight back. Not that he really could. Anyway, an angry Scotsman who felt his honor has been wronged isn't going to be easy to cool down. And so basically, Jamie has no proof of who he is because he doesn't have his, papers with him. And John also isn't wearing his uniform. So it's worse than just being caught wearing your uniform, because it, I believe, is kind of like an instant death sentence. It's supposed to be, if I remember correctly from the book. If you were caught, if an officer is specifically an officer, I don't know, but a soldier's caught not wearing their uniform in enemy territory, and you're not saying who you are, you're immediate, they can do something to you. So he's like, well, we're going to take him and we're going to question him because remember Paoli, and we'll find out what that was soon, which is going to get John in even more of a thing. And this is all, it would be a comedy of errors if it wasn't so serious, okay? Because this just tumbles out. And it's so interesting watching it in a show because it feels like it does in the book. It really does. I was gushing with my friend Kim about this because the way that Diana writes that, it can be jarring to you. She changes POVs very quickly. One of the things I write down, I don't know if I put it in the front of this one. I put it in the, I did put it in front. When I did one of my rereads of this, I write a list of all the POVs that we get. I keep track as they come across. And in book 8, which is the one we are finally in with this story, we are going through so many POVs and it switches. Now, when that's on TV, that can actually be really great and it keeps the tension high and you're going back and forth. Whereas in the book, sometimes we're I'd like to spend a little more time in this place. But anyway, keep going. And so John ends up having to go with these men and Jamie is like, we're not done, sir. And he's like, no, we are not. And I'm not bloody sorry. And then he has to leave, which I love. Okay. So then we stick with John and these guys and they search him and they find a letter and he's like, he's like, you said you weren't an active soldier. And he's like, I am not. Okay. I was at home, I was home with my nephew. He's trying to explain everything. And they're like, well, what's this then? Well, it turns out that letter that he didn't get a chance to read was saying that Clinton was recalling him. He's being recalled to duty. So technically he is an officer again, who isn't wearing his coat and who was in enemy territory meeting with a rebel general. And so they're like, are you a spy? Were you handing information or was he giving you information? And so it's just no, this is personal. Okay. It's difficult to explain, all these things. So he's like, shit. This is when I think they say, remember Paoli, because they mention his cousin or is it his brother, his cousin? I think it's his cousin, who was the one who kind of did this massacre that happened. Did I write down his name? Henry? Is it? I have so many names written down, y'all. I don't know. But it was a Charles Gray. Anyway, he did something bad and they want to punish someone for it. So that's where we are with that. Okay. All right. Now we go to William. William is wandering around saying bastard, bastard, bastard. Just so great. And he ends up causing a ruckus at a whorehouse where he ends up going in and the woman kind of makes a joke and he's angry and he doesn't in the show they don't have him slap her or anything, but he spills wine all over her and she's like, get out. And he's horrified because he's I did not just mean to be violent. Well, his temper is getting out of control. She kicks him out. Okay. So that scene, but is important for setup because we come back to it later. Then we have Jamie looking for Colonel Morgan. And so he has letters from... Sorry, I didn't write this down. He has letters from Scotland that were from France. Did he get stuff from France? I think it was from France. There's so many names, blah, 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 blah. But he sees Colonel Morgan, and then Colonel Morgan is like, hey, stay here for just a minute. I have someone for you to talk to. And so we see Washington and he gets the letters over to him and Washington asks him, I want to give you a battalion And he's like, I don't remember now if the show said it. I just know the answer because I have it written down, but it's Henry Taylor's battalion. So he's making him a brigadier general of the Continental Army. And he's like, technically Congress will have to vote on it, but you'll be an acting general until then. Now, this is also something that the show doesn't say, but I'm just going to say it here because it makes the most sense here. Because one of the things that they don't have is like, you know, the thoughts in Jamie's head. Because this scene is in, you know, Jamie's POV in the book. And Jamie doesn't have a choice but to accept this, okay? We're kind of like, really? We're going back into bat? Like, why are we doing this? Well, any men from the ages of like 16 to 60 can be like pressed into service, right? That's what happened to him in an earlier book, in an earlier season, when they wanted to go to Scotland the first time in the beginning of Echoes, and he didn't have a choice, or they were gonna like throw him in jail. So he had to be with them, and he was with them until his cousin died, and then he took his body to Scotland. That's why he gotta go. So now he's back, and they are putting him back in. And so in the show, he just is like, sure, I'll take it, and we just accept it. But in the book, we see his thoughts more, where he's like, I don't have a choice. Like, I have to say yes. But he accepts it. So now he's a general again. Okay, now we switch to Rachel and Ian, who are a part of like they're evacuating from Philadelphia. All of the people are, and they're going, and they run into William, and William is like, oh, I'm so excited to see Miss Hunter. He's all smiley, and he's like, I'm helping with this. And things go a bit awry, because when Rachel says that Ian and her were trying to find a Quaker to marry them, and nobody would, and she's like, we're betrothed. And William, this is just the last like straw today. And this is, I think, if there's anything where he's a little punk, and he's supposed to feel like a punk, okay? He's acting out, he's doing the things where we're like, dude, you need to rein it in, man. So we're not supposed to like him when he does this. He ends up punching Ian, and then when like Ian fights back, Ian's the one who gets tied to the back of a wagon, and William just tells him to. He's like, no, he started it. And he's like, he did not. What are you doing? And then he kisses Rachel. And that's not going to go well. But he's very angry because he's known the whole time that William is his cousin, and he never said anything. And Rachel even is like, oh, and he's like, you knew too? And he's like, well, anyone who's seen you both would know, which is kind of a nice confirmation to have, because that's part of the reason why Jamie has always had to try to be in different places than him, is because they're supposed to look like each other's ghosts, basically, or a fetch of each other or whatever. So Ian ends up getting detained. Now we quickly switch back to number 17 Chestnut Street, which is where Claire is. And there's a British officer looking for Lord John. And the housekeeper is like, where is he? And Claire's like, I don't know. What's the big deal? And he's like, well, he's being recalled, and he said he should have gotten a letter for that. And Claire's like, well, I don't exactly know where he is. I don't know what happened, but when he gets back, we'll like figure it out. But this is when the like information gets shared with Claire that John is active duty again, and she's like, oh God, what's going on with all this? Like, this is crazy. Okay, so then we go to Lord John Grey is brought before Colonel Smith, is that guy's name? And we see the eye slowly swelling and swelling too, which is just like, they did so good with like the progressing the case of his injuries and everything. And John is like getting progressively more kind of like slap happy in a few of these scenes too, of just like the shit is out. I just love it. But he has this discussion with Smith, and basically the Paoli massacre is explained, and that his cousin was the one who had something to do with it, and that they're going to want to punish him for that. Here's where I wrote it. Major General Charles Grey is the one who did that, and there was people that were massacred in like a tavern and all of these things. And so they're like, were you a spy? And John is like, no, it's a personal thing. That's why I was there. I did not know that I was pulled back into this. Like, this all just happened so quickly. And Smith is kind of like, I mean, I believe you, but also, you know, they're going to punish you. And he's like, I don't think they would hang me out of hand. Like, hanging a Grey for someone else's crimes, like, that would be really foolish. And he's like, people aren't really thinking that clearly with it. They have you, and they're going to want to punish you for what someone else did. So that's a bit of a threat we have there. All right, keeping it moving. I'm trying to go as fast as I can. So there's the wagon train evacuation. Jamie happens to run across it, and Ian, like, sees him on his horse. And this is another thing where the note in the book tells you, because Ian sees him, and he doesn't say anything. And in the show, you probably think it's because, like, he doesn't want to call attention to him. But you'll know, like, in the book, the look on his face, Ian thinks he sees a ghost because he sees him riding by on his horse, and he doesn't do anything. But then Jamie finds Rachel, and she's like, yep, I'm not dead. It's great. And it's very clear that Rachel tells Jamie why Ian is tied up there and what William did. And so Jamie pulls William aside. Oh, this scene is so good, you guys. Face to face now, knowing who they are, and the actors do so good. And he's like, you're going to get him out of there, or I'm going to go and tell them who you are, and you're going to deal with that. And he's like, do you understand me? And he's like, yes. God damn you, sir. God damn you to hell. And he's like, no doubt. No doubt. So then we move on again back to John. Whew, see so much switching, you guys. Okay, here we go. Here we go. So John is still the prisoner, and his eye's getting really bad. Denny happens to be there right now, which, yes, because we are with the rebels. That's where we are. Yep. And Denny explains with his eye that, like, the bone is probably broken, but I'm worried about, like, your eye. I'm going to get you an eye patch, so hopefully the swelling will reduce. And then Denzel is like, I wish your wife was here. And John is like, don't you know, Denzel, Mr. Hunter? Claire's not my wife anymore. I love it. Jamie Fraser isn't dead. And it's so great because he's like, it's such a weird thing because it's like, obviously John is happy Jamie isn't dead. But all of this has just been, it's a lot. So Colonel Smith tells Denny that they're going to hang him. Like, that's what's going to happen when the other guy gets there, is they're going to hang him for being a spy and for other things. So we see Ian gets freed, and then we see William is a sad boy, letting him go. And Rachel is just looking at him like, you fucked up, boy. And he did. So then he goes back to the brothel again. And there's a very uncomfortable scene. This is a direct from the book scene, though. That scene about buggering and basically talking about how you want a girl who's had it up the ass before, but not too much, blah, blah, blah. So William actually asks for Arabella, who is the same woman that he had freaked out on before. And they go up to the room, and he's apologizing. And he's like, I'm sorry. I was out of sorts. I really wasn't trying to cause any problems. And she's like, I didn't think you were going to hurt me, but you ruined my dress. Like, this is... And he's like, I will pay for your dress. And he's like, I paid for the whole night. And then there's this cute thing. He's like, my father once told me that the best gift you can give a whore is a night of sleep. And so he's like, we're not going to do anything. Like, just lay down. And he's like, I'm going to sleep in the chair. And she's like, okay. And so she gets into bed, and he's just sitting there. She's like, get into bed, you idiot. This is also direct book scene, you guys. Directly in there. And so he finally gets into bed, and he won't stop moving. And she ends up on top of him. And he's like, I'm a bastard, don't you see? The only thing left I have is my word. And they end up having sex. And he starts crying. And he's like, why did you make me break my word? And she's like, don't you think a whore maybe wants to keep their word too? Which is supposed to mean, like, he paid for the night, so he's going to get that. But she then holds him while he cries. And it's sweet. The poor boy has, he needs to get his shit together, but also he's allowed to freak out for a little bit, okay? In total, this has been like 24 hours. He's still processing all this. And at least he went and made good with her. And, oh, and also her name is Jane. And we'll see if Arabella Jane remains a single appearance person, or if she'll come back in again. Because Jane is someone that we see again in the book, so we'll see. Okay, gotta keep it moving. So then we have John and Denny. And Denny brings him some food, and he slips him a knife, and he says, you have to get away. When that guy gets here, they're going to kill you. And he's like, you can get in my wagon. I have to leave tomorrow. And he's like, no. I'm not involving you in this. But he has a knife. And that's that quick scene. Now we go back to 17 Chestnut Street, and here is where the big guns come out, y'all. The big guns come out right here. I gotta keep it going. I'm sorry, I have so much details, but Christmas party awaits. And Jamie has showed up, and Claire is so happy to see him, and he's just like, John said that you laid with him. And she's like, well, I wouldn't quite say that. And he's like, well, you told me you did. And he's like, well, I just mean it wasn't necessarily lying down. It was on the floor, if I recall. And this scene, okay, I'm going to focus on the show first. But again, this is so close to the book. It's fantastic. But the way this is shot, I'm trying to focus on the show here because it's dead silent for almost 2 full minutes with no background noise at all. It's just her talking about the ache that it was, and that, you know, and Jamie's like, tell me about it. And she explains that she had almost just killed herself, and then he came in and he told me, we're not going to mourn alone tonight. And then we didn't. And she was like, I very much needed someone to touch me in that moment, and he put his pain over the top of mine. He triaged me. He laid his grief and pain on top of me, and we helped each other. And so then Jamie says, and he obliged you, I take it. And she says he did. And then he asks, did he bugger you? Which we have now talked about that a little bit, which is an interesting choice. But anyway, she's like, you are a bastard. Like, how could you say that? And then he says to her, he's like, I've loved you since I first saw you, Sassenach, but you think you feel with your body, you always have. And she's like, what, are you saying I was a whore? And he's like, no, this is one of my favorite lines too. He's like, you could sleep with the whole British Army, and I would mind, but it wouldn't stop me from loving you. And that's a really great scene. I love that. I'm sorry. It's so good. And she does think with her body. Like we've talked about that. And then it comes into like, I needed someone to hit. And he was like, you hit him? And he's like, no, I was hitting you. That's what was happening. And I was so angry because he had more courage than me, and he made me feel it, and I didn't want to. And so I took it out on him. And then Jamie brings up that when Geneva died and there was a baby, and he said that child just like burst my guts out from the inside. And he said that bloody Englishman bandaged me with his friendship. So no, I didn't kill him, but I really wanted to. Yeah. And then he says to her, he's like, I'm not saying that I won't make a fuss, because I will, but I love you, and are you my wife? And she says, of course that I am. And so now this last little bit, which will finish this up, it goes between them making love on a table and John escaping. So he uses the knife that Denny caught him, and he cuts his ties, and then he sneaks out of the tent. And then this cuts between Jamie and Claire having reconnective sex on the table, which I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't a hugest fan of that. We'll talk about when we get to it. It's not because of that. It's just, it was so awkward. And I mean, I know watching TV sex can be awkward either. But Kat and Katrina, or not, Kat and Katrina's the same person. Kat and Sam, they know how to have, like, they have hot sex on, fake sex on TV all the time. And this just felt so weird with, like, I get it. They were like, we're keeping all the clothes on for this one, but it felt weird. We'll get to why when we talk about comparison to the book. But still, it's a powerful scene, whether I thought it was awkward or not, because it's their reconnection together and the kissing and all that. And it goes between the two. And John is escaping, but then the rebels wake up and they're coming after him. And it ends with him running through the woods, and we hear a shot and the screen goes black. And I'll tell you what I think happens when we get to the very end. So that was my recap. Still took me a half hour no matter what I try to do here. But we'll see if I can be faster with the wrap-up. So that was my recap of this episode. Before we do it, this was wonderful, guys. Like I said, I was vibrating the whole way through. The acting in this, every scene. Even because I watch all of these 2 times if I can. if I can, I watch all these 2 times before I film this, because I've just discovered the first time through, I just want to watch it. I don't want to have to be taking notes or looking at whatever. I just watch it. And the second time through, I noticed even more little things about it while I was taking the notes, and I just love that. So anyway, this was wonderful. So for book scenes, how did this go? Like I said, I have 2 whole pages of scenes that they got right here, okay? So we finally, I think maybe finally finished up with Echoes. There was still one last scene from Echoes that was in here, which was funny. And it was the scene, which is great, because remember, this would have been like a cliffhanger for everyone, okay? It was the very end of this, where it has them doing the running part, and it ends with him saying, I had carnal knowledge of your wife, and Jamie says, oh, why? And then, like, that's the end of this. So the last thing that John said to Jamie before people had to wait, let me see here, let me peek. This one came out in, this came out in 2009 is when this came out. Okay. This one came out, I believe, in 2014. Okay. So people waited 5 years to find out what Jamie was going to say to John about that. Like, isn't that just cruel? Oh, wait till we get to the end of this book, y'all. Just you wait. But anyway, so that very last scene was that one. Now we're officially in Moby, okay? Like, we had some scenes in this one with the Bree and Roger stuff, which, by the way, I'll comment on that. I do like that I was kind of right about that guess, that we took a break from Roger and Bree in this one. There was just too much going on. What would we have even squeezed in with them in this one? It would have felt like it was breaking the pace. This episode did a really good job moving through everything. So just before anything else, like, it would have felt really weird to break that up. And again, I think that's something that Diana does well in her stories too, because part of the reason she does like part 1. So basically this whole episode was part 1 of this. And part 2, which I think will be the next episode, is called Meanwhile Back at the Ranch, and the whole next part is what's happening with Roger and Bree and Buck, and it's all of those. So we've done a few of those scenes right in the last one. I showed you that, like the stuff with Lollybrock and Dougal and Galus, all of that happens in this one, but this episode was like this whole part with Jamie and Claire and everything. So yeah, it pretty much, he's just all in there. So I won't go thing by thing, but when I was doing this, each scene I wrote which scene it was from the book, and there wasn't a single scene that wasn't from the book. There's stuff missing, which is what we're going to talk about in this section, but there wasn't a single scene in this episode that isn't from the book. And they've done that pretty much this whole, like, this whole season maybe, but at least the last 4. And one of the things, again, I was talking to my friend about is why I think this hits so well. It's not that they haven't changed things. We're about to talk about a couple significant changes that they've made, but where I think, and my friend made the comparison to Bridgerton, which I thought was so smart. Such a smart comparison, because it's not that they haven't changed things. It's that they have pretty good reasons for things they have changed, and everything else is still book accurate. So that gives me the biggest thrill. They've picked the parts of the book that are still going to be really good for the people who haven't read them, who, you know, who aren't in on all of that. But those of us who've read the books, I can be like so behind the show. I can just be so happy for it because they're not changing things I love, right? Whereas in earlier seasons, things that really bugged me were these little changes they would make that they didn't have to. Because it's like, why did you change that? This doesn't have to do with logistics or with money or with whatever. You had them say different words. Like, why? Diana Gabaldon has given you her words. Why would you change them? You know, and I I'm sure that has to do too with like writers who there's some info you have to fit into it that's in the head. Like that happens in this one, specifically in one of the scenes with Jamie. Like he has to say out loud some things that are in his head because we're not doing voiceover for him. Whereas, you know, in the Roger things, there's things he can't say out loud because he's in a different time. So we've been having voiceover for him, which I've gotten in my comments. Some people don't like, but as a book reader, I've loved them because they're all thoughts right from the book that he's thinking during those scenes. And we have to know what he's thinking, but he can't say those out loud. So anyway, that's what I find very impressive about this is that they haven't like cut thing, or they haven't changed the things they show. And oop, there's a plane going over. That's really important to me, at least. I love that. So yeah, going through this, there wasn't a single scene that wasn't in there. And honestly, a lot of the words themselves are still incredibly accurate. So just a couple scenes I want to talk about that I really thought were well done, and then we'll talk about the differences that they made. Because again, those differences 90% have to do with the fact is that we've cut a lot of characters. We have. And I'm bittersweet about that because there's some characters I dearly love and I'm sad that we've cut them. But when I look at what we're getting and how jam-packed they've made everything, like they haven't wasted time. You know, like there was those episodes in past seasons that the whole plot of that episode doesn't even happen. And so it's like you wasted an hour of this, right? When this show is all said and done, there's, I believe, going to be like 105 episodes about, you know, that's about 105 hours to tell 40 years worth of story, you know? If you waste a whole hour on a plot that makes no sense and is actually going to deviate us from the stuff we need to do, you're wasting the time. And what I feel like particularly seasons 6 and 7 have done is they have maximized the time they do have, right? We are probably going to skip big chunks of this book because from what I've heard, we're not going to spend tons of time on the war, okay? And there are big sections that are on the war, but guess what? A lot of the book readers were bored by the war. Okay, like I like some of it. I love when Washington pops up and when they talk about John Andre and we hear about, like, I love that because I'm a history nerd. But when you're reading these for the first time, a lot of readers fall off because of the chapters of war and the medicine and all those things. They can get boring. It's only on my second and third and fourth reads of these that I really am like, well, I already know where the story is going. Let me pick in at all these details. Anyway, going on a rant with this. But I love that. And so I really can't praise the show like highly enough for doing that because it makes watching it so much fun. It makes it more for me of being like, oh, look at how good they did that scene instead of being like, what is this? Why is Murtaugh in this place? You know, I love that actor too. Okay, I love him, but he wasn't supposed to be there. And I was like, there's other things you could have been telling. Like you could have been building the relationship with Roger that you neglected for that whole season. And it made him a weak character for a lot of people, you know? Anyway, so really, really great scenes. I marked a couple of my favorite ones here. I really did love, oh, there's so much that I really loved. The scene with Jamie and so well, like that whole scene, it's just one page right here and they get it all in there. And this is what he said, and you'll see how close it is to it. But you see him in his head, like he's seeing William and he never talks to William. He's only shot at him across a battlefield and almost like been sick with it, right? And he sees him and he sees how upset he is, and he saw his face and he said, Christ, do I look like that in my temper? And he says, well, rend away, lad. We'll see who dances. He looked ready to rend someone limb from limb. So he said, you, come aside with me now. The look on William's face changed from incipient murder to the same look of startled horror Jamie had seen on Ian's. Had matters been otherwise, he'd have laughed. As it was, he gripped William hard by the upper arm, pushed him off balance, and had him into the shelter of scrim of saplings before he could set his feet hard. You, William blurted. What the devil are you doing here? And where is my... What are you doing here? Talking to you. If you'll close your mouth for a moment, Jamie said. I'm sorry I can't do a Scottish accent. I wish I could. Listen to me, lad, because I'm telling you what you're going to do. You're not telling me anything, William began furiously and cocked a fist. Jamie grabbed him by the upper arm again and this time dug his fingers hard into the spot Claire had shown him, on the underside of the bone. William let out a strangled "ah!" and started to pant, his eyes bulging. So he's grabbing a pressure point on his right there. You're going to catch up the men ye sent Ian with and tell them to set him free, Jamie said evenly. And if you don't, I go down under a flag of truce to where the camp they're taking him, introduce myself, tell the commander who you are, and explain the reason for the fight. You'll be right there beside me. Do I make myself clear? He asked, increasing the pressure with his fingers. Yes! The word came out in a hiss, and Jamie let go suddenly, folding his fingers into a fist to hide the fact that they were trembling and twitching from the effort. God damn you, sir, William whispered, and his eyes were black with violence. God damn you to hell. His arm hung limp and must have hurt, but he wouldn't rub it, not with Jamie watching. Jamie nodded. No doubt, he said quietly, and went into the forest. Once out of sight of the road, he leaned against a tree, feeling sweat stream down his face. His back felt cast in cement. His whole body was trembling, but he hoped that William had been too distraught to notice. God, should it have come to blows, I couldn't take him. He closed his eyes and listened to his heart, which was thumping like a bodhrán. After a little, he heard the sound of hooves on the road, a horse galloping, and turned to peer through the trees and caught a glimpse of William thundering past, headed in the direction of Ian. The layers to that scene, you guys, which, again, they do very well. You probably don't see it in the show because, I mean, the actor playing William, he does a great job. As I said, he's having to play the petulant young man right now. But in this scene, you see, like, Jamie is kind of in awe of his son, but he also is having to show how strong and tough he is to literally muscle him into doing something, muscling him into doing the right thing because he's throwing a fit about it. But Jamie is literally in awe of how strong and broad and brawn his son is. And there's that part of him that's so, like, proud, but he's also like, I couldn't have taken him. Like, if he'd wanted to go after me, I couldn't beat him. And that's a scary thing to notice, but also like proud at the same time. Anyway, that is such a short scene, but like they did all of that. Like all of that was in there. It was so good. Okay, the rest of this time gushing about it, we got to go to the confrontation scene here because, again, my favorite scene in this book, one of my favorite scenes in the entire thing, and they did so well with it. Now, one of the things Diana does do is she does like break tension a lot. And Claire and Jamie always kind of let each other do that to each other when they're mad. And this is one of the few cases that Jamie keeps it so straight the whole time. And I feel like Sam Heughan portrayed that so well because Claire's sending out these like little pulses trying to crack it. And he's just like, don't change the subject. Like he stays in it the whole time. And that is done so well in the show. Now, again, I'm going to go through a few of the parts of this book. They do like sputter a little bit more. There's a bit of levity that tosses in at different points. But this is a turning point for these two. Not because you're worried they would separate or be away from each other, but it really is like there are some raw things coming out. Things that they have thought and said. And also, though, it's a testing of, like, do you really mean what you said? Because, you know, Jamie has said if he died, he'd want her to go back. And, you know, that doesn't get mentioned in the show, but, like, that's part of the reason he hurried back so quick is he was like, if she thinks I'm dead, I've told her to go home. And she said she'd stay, but she might go back to our daughter. Like, you know, she might go to the family. So he needs to get there in time, right? But, like, this is so intense. And he is like in the book, there's so much more like nuance to it all, but I feel like Sam plays it really well. A couple moments just to call out about it. A lot of the words are exactly the same, a lot of these things, and he's just being very like still about it. And he's like, I need you to tell me. And he's like, she says, I remember how it began. And he's like, we'll start with that. And we get to that part, like, it's so good. And this is where Claire says right here, I'm going to read this bit and then we'll wrap it up because it was so good, you guys. I'll point out the things they changed after this, but it was fantastic. Okay. So she said, he had a fresh decanter in his hands. He put it down on the dressing table and glared at me and said, I will not mourn him alone tonight. And, Jamie said, and he didn't, I said a little sharply. I told him to sit down and he did, and he poured out more brandy and we drank it, and I have not one single notion what we said, but we were talking about you. And then he stood up and I stood up, and I couldn't bear to be alone. I couldn't bear for him to be alone, and I more or less flung myself at him because I very much needed someone to touch me just then. And he obliged you to take it. And I nodded, and I felt anger start to rise. Did he bugger you? I said. You absolute bastard, I said. You said he desired you to kill him. You didn't, did you? He held my eyes, his own steady as a rifle barrel. Would you mind if I did? He asked softly. Yes, I bloody well would, but you didn't. I know you didn't. No, he said. You don't know that. Despite my conviction that he was bluffing, a small chill prickled the hairs on my forearms. That dead seriousness. He's so rarely that serious with her. He always brings in the levity or have a smile for her or wants to comfort her, and that is not happening here. One of the only other times that's happened was in book 2 with the blackjack situation and Frank's situation. I should have been within my rights. You would not, I said, the chill fading into crossness. You didn't have any rights. You were bloody dead. Despite the crossness, my voice broke a bit on the word dead. What? Did you think it didn't matter? No, he said, and took my mud-stained hand in his. There we go, a moment of touch. But I didn't know it mattered quite that much. He held me tight, his breath warm on the top of my head, and when I stopped at last, he put me away a little and cupped my face in his hand. So this is where, in the book, like, the scene, like, breaks now, and he's like, this was really hard. This was really heavy for everybody, right? And this is the line then. I've loved you since I saw you, Sassenach, he said very quietly, holding my eyes with his own. They were bloodshot and lined with tiredness, but they were very blue. I will love you forever. Does not matter if he slept with the whole English army. Well, no, he corrected himself. It would matter, but it wouldn't stop me from loving you. I didn't think it would, I sniffed. It was my impression, he said, that he told you because he was sure you would tell me. So I would have, I said. Though I might have possibly waited till you had got home, had a bath, and been fed supper. If there's one thing I know about men, it's that you don't break things like this to them on an empty stomach. When did you last eat? This morning. Sausages. Do not be changing the subject. So, same thing. His voice was level, but there was a good deal of feeling bubbling under. He might as well have been a pan of simmering milk. I understand, but I need to know what happened. You understand, I echoed. Well, I didn't like it, but I understand it. You do? I do. You both thought I was dead, and I ken what you're like when you're drunk, Sassenach. How bloody dare you? He touched, and this is when she slaps him. I did not mean it quite that way it sounded, Sassenach. Besides, am I not the aggrieved party here? No, you bloody aren't, he snapped. You go off and get drowned and leave me all alone in the midst of spies and soldiers and with children, you and Fergus both, you bastards. Leave me and Marcelly to... I was so choked with emotion that I couldn't go on, and I was damned if I'd cry. I'd cried enough. So, moving on from this here, keep going to this here. I've taken you to bed 1,000 times, Sassenach. Do you not think I paid attention? 2,000 or 3,000 times at least, I said, and no. Well then, I ken what you're like in bed, and I see, well, all too well, how this likely was. And then he goes on to explain the stuff about Mary McNabb, and he says, like, it was tender and it was sad, and we went through all of that. And then, and he says, and for you, And she said, it wasn't tender and it wasn't sad. It should have been. When he came into my room and he said he wouldn't mourn you alone, and we talked, and then I got up and went to him expecting, if I had so much as an expectation, I don't think I had any conscious thought. No. Blind drunk, were ye? Yes, I bloody was, and so was he. Yes, I bloody was. I was drunk every damn day since I heard you were dead. And what did he give ye then, Sassenach? Something to hit, at least to begin with. Ye hit him? No, I hit you. Violence, that was a part of it. Not that I was numb, deliberately numb, because I couldn't bear to feel, and he could, and he had more courage than I did, and made me feel it too, and that's why I hit him. So, yep, and then he explains that with Geneva, and really the only difference in this thing is he said this here. And then there was William, when Geneva died, and it was my fault, and it was a knife in my heart, and then William. That barn cut me wide open, Sassenach. He spilled my guts out into my hands. And that bloody English sodomite bandaged me with his friendship. So no, I didn't kill him. I did not ken if I'm glad of it or not, but I didn't. And she said, I knew that, I'm glad. And then where we change it, sorry that I just did a dramatic reading of all of that, but it's my favorite. It's my favorite, and you're here on my channel, and you can skip it if you want to. So then he says, where is there a bed? I need to get you naked. And they're trying to find an inn to have sex. And this is kind of where it changes, is that one part gets left out. As I said, they find a place to have sex, and he's saying, you know, are you in a position to make demands of what kind of sex that we have? And he's like, I'm your wife. And he says, I know that. And he says, I must have you right now. And so they're getting into it, and she is asking him to punish her. And this is where a scene comes back into mind. And this is why I'm a bit sad it wasn't here, because it's this. I was trying to goad him into punishing me. And he says, I will not do it. Won't do what? I said. I will not punish you for it. I'll not do that, do you hear? I don't friggin' want you to punish me, you bastard. I want you to... God, you know what I want. I do. Ask me to your bed. I shall come to ye, for that matter. I shall come whether ye ask it or no. But remember, Sassenach, I am your man, and serve ye I will. No, do, I said. Please do, Jamie. I want you so. God, I need you, Claire. So she's trying to kind of goad him into hurting her. And it's a callback to a thing that's brought up a few times, where he's never going to punish her again, and he's never going to use sex as the punishment. And that goes all the way back to Outlander. And so I love that callback, and it's all right that it wasn't in the show, but I just had to share it with you. Okay, so the stuff that's changed. Let's talk about the stuff that's changed. The main thing that we're dealing with here is where we don't have some characters, and that is where the main changes happen, because in this book, those scenes that we get of Claire with like the housekeeper, Claire has Jenny with her, right? Because Jenny came back with Jamie. And so Jenny is there, and Claire's also with like Fergus and Marcelly and the kids. We're also missing Dottie, who at this time is with Denny. And it's actually Dottie who sneaks John the knife in the book. So Dottie and Denny are together with the Continental Army helping out there. And Denny is the one who he does work on John. And then Dottie is the one who brings John dinner, and she slips him the knife. So that's a bit different. Then we also miss Hal showing up. Okay, so that is John's older brother. Did I write down his name? I don't think I wrote down the page of that one. Let me see. I don't think I did. But Hal shows up after Jamie and John are gone, and he has an asthma attack in the street, and Claire helps him with that and brings him home. And Jermaine is actually with them too, and people start throwing like rocks at Hal and Claire because they know like Claire's married to Lord John, and then they see a rebel, or the the officer and they're trying to chase him out, and there's boys throwing stones, and Jermaine pops up and he's like, "That's my granny, stop throwing things at her." It's so cute. And he's like, "Granny, you do always cause a ruckus." It's so cute. And we also miss Jenny meeting all of the kids, and when she meets Henry Christian, he's like, "Who are you?" And she's like, I'm your Granny Janet child. And so she's like holding Henry Christian. It's so cute. So we don't have Jenny, and that's the biggest thing. We don't have Jenny, and we don't have Hal, and we don't have Dottie. And so some of the scenes are given to other people, but on the whole, Hal has just been cut out, and I don't know if we'll get him. I don't know if we'll get Hal and Dottie back. Dottie ends up with Denny in the books, and I don't know what's happening. Okay, I know no one's gonna agree with me with this, I don't know, but did anyone feel a little tension between like Denny and John when he was like helping him? That's so not a book thing at all, but I was kind of like, this is kind of cute. I'm not saying I want that to happen, but there was a few scenes where like Denny's so earnestly trying to help him and all that. It was cute. Okay, I'm just saying it was cute. So that's basically it. There's also Claire gets visited by Clinton and Richardson and Hal, and then she's helping with his asthma, and there's lots of conversations going on right there. And then yeah, part 1 ends with John getting away. So here we go. So sorry, wrapping this up. I'm giving it a 10. I'm giving it a 10 because for the things that were in it, as I said, all of this is from the book. There was barely a single word that isn't from the book. So I don't know what my standard can be higher than this, because at this point in the series where we're at, and characters who've been cut and actors we can't have, I don't think we can get closer. I don't think there can be a more accurate episode than this at this point. So continuing to go like 8, 9, 9.5, like I'm just going to call this one a 10. I'm giving it a 10. There we go. It's my first 10 I think I've given in years, honestly. But when I was pulling out the things, I literally was watching a scene, and then my second time through, and I would pause it and look it up, and I would find it. Every scene was in the book, and so that's a 10 out of 10. It's a 10 out of 10. The acting elevates it so much. The connection, the feeling is there. Like I even cried for William when he was having sex with Jane, and he's crying. Like I was devastated for them. It was great. So 10 out of 10. Now, what I think is happening for the rest of it. So you can skip this now if you don't want to know my guesses, or if you don't want spoilers for it, because I'm going to talk about some stuff that happens. Where I think we're going next. So we have 4 episodes left. The next one is called Hello, Goodbye. We need to go back to Bree and Roger and them and everything. Now, will a whole episode be Bree and Roger? I'm not sure. But as I had said before, I would be okay with that. I would be okay if it mostly focused on Bree and Roger, because we're building up here to the end of this book, and there's a lot of Bree and Roger stuff that has to happen. We really need to focus on Bree, by the way. We need to find Jem. There are still, like, yeah, Jem is a POV that gets added in book 8. And so we get to learn from his point. Like, I don't know how they'll do that in the show. I mean, I know they'll show him, but when we get Jem's POV, we learn deeply more about his connection with Mandy and how actually connected those two are, which is really cool. So, yeah. But anyway, so I think we're going to go to that. So if I had to guess, I think Hello and Goodbye is going to focus on them, because it kind of makes sense too. Like they're saying hello to people and then goodbye, like with time and everything. So I don't know if that episode will end with Bree and the kids with Roger. Maybe it will, because based on what some of the other episodes are, I think we could get a bunch with Bree and Roger, end their episode with them headed back to the past, and then have stuff happen, and then them arrive at the end. Like maybe they will like be gone from us for a while and then we'll get them. I don't know. But I think Hello and Goodbye is really strongly going to focus on those two, because then the next episode then is, oh shoot, I had written them down. I don't have it now. But episode 14 is the one written by Diana Gabaldon. and there is a big injury coming up for someone, and it has some very important things in it, and I believe that that could be the episode that Diana is writing. I also think that one, because it says you do not get used to it, and I think that that could mean a couple of things. There in the preview, there is that line being said where when they're going to war and Rachel is asking, do you ever get used to it? And Claire says, no, you don't. And so I think that that one's going to focus on like battle, I think. I've heard there really only will be one episode that has a lot of war in it. So maybe that one will be, and maybe that will end with her injury, because episode 15 is called Written in My Own Heart's Blood. And then there's one more after that. So that's kind of where I see where we're going next. I think the next episode will be pretty Brie and Roger centric. Maybe we'll get another here or there, because they very rarely don't show Jamie and Claire for an entire episode. So maybe we'll get a little bit of them. But I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be really tense. Hello and goodbye. But I really don't care to have 3 timelines again. Like, just pick 2. It's fine. And then, then we'll have some battle, and like, we still need to see Ian and Rachel get married, and there's a lot. But anyway, those are my guesses for the next couple. Oh, I forgot one other thing. I'm sorry so much. So, where John ends up though, okay? So, that shot that we heard, I don't think John is getting shot at. What I think is happening is, I think that it's someone protecting John shooting back at them, possibly. So I think John ends up getting rescued by someone, and if you read the book, you know where he ends up. And that's what I think that shot was. I don't think the shot was at him. I think it's, because there's a shot and it goes black and we see him fall, but I think it's someone shooting towards what's coming for him. That would be my guess. So we'll see where it picks up. I love Lord John's getting some action in here. It's great. So yeah. Okay, anyway, we really got to wrap this up. I was only supposed to talk for 45 minutes, and look where we're at. So I got to hurry. But thank you so much for watching this. Of course, there'll be a pinned comment down below. Let me know your favorite moments of the episode. Let me know how you think it compared to the book. Do you think I'm right? Think I'm wrong? To give it a 10? But again, like, I'm a comparison. If I factored in that they left out characters, I'd give it an 8. But honestly, where I'm at right now, I'm looking at the content they have, and they didn't change like anything. So I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. I'm in. So thank you so much for watching, my friends. We'll see you next time. Bye.